Just hope that someday there's a great big fire and just my films are destroyed.
The world remembers Connie Francis as a dazzling star, a voice so powerful it could bring audiences to tears, a performer whose songs became the soundtrack of an era. But behind the glamorous facade was a woman whose life was shattered by unimaginable heartbreak, violence, and loss. How does someone go from being one of the biggest musical icons of the 1950s and 60s to disappearing from the stage for nearly a decade? What kind of pain forces a woman with everything, fame, talent, and fortune, to step away from the one thing she loves most? And what shocking secrets has she held onto for decades, only now beginning to reveal? This is the untold story of Connie Francis, a life filled with success but also overshadowed by devastating tragedy. From a strict and controlling father who shaped every moment of her childhood to a brutal attack that left her emotionally shattered, her journey is one of resilience, sorrow, and survival. Her voice made her a legend, but what the world didn't hear was the pain behind every lyric she sang. But before the world knew her as Connie Francis, she was just a young girl with a dream and a father who refused to let her fail. Before the world knew her as Connie Francis, she was just Conchetta Rosa Maria Franconero, a young girl growing up in Newark, New Jersey. Born on December 12, 1937, she was the first child in a strict Italian-American household, where family honor and success were everything. From the moment she could walk, her father, George Franconero Sr., had a plan for her. He wasn't just a father. He was a man on a mission, determined to shape her into a star, whether she wanted it or not. Newark was a melting pot of cultures, and young Connie was surrounded by a mix of languages, traditions, and music. She quickly picked up Yiddish and Hebrew, blending in with the diverse community. It would later help her connect with audiences in ways she never expected. But at the time, all that mattered was pleasing her father. Music was not a choice in the Franconero household, it was an expectation. At 3 years old, her father gave her an option: learn the piano or the accordion. Without understanding the weight of the decision, she chose the accordion, a choice she later called her first big mistake. While other children played outside, Connie was indoors, practicing scales and melodies for hours. Her father's unyielding discipline made sure of that. By the time she was 4 years old, she was already performing at family gatherings and local events. It wasn't long before she won talent shows and caught the attention of people who mattered. But George Franconero Sr. was not satisfied. He wanted more. He wanted his daughter's name in lights. The name Conchetta Franconero didn't sound like a star, at least not to her father. So, without asking her, he changed it to Connie Francis, short, catchy, and easy to remember. To him, it was just another step toward building her career, but to Connie, it was the first sign that she was losing control of her own identity. As she grew older, the pressure intensified. There was no room for mistakes, no space for childhood dreams that didn't fit into her father's vision. The only thing that mattered was making it in the music industry. She practiced relentlessly, performed wherever she could, and followed every instruction given to her. While other teenagers were discovering freedom, Connie was living under the weight of expectations. Her father had mapped out her entire future, but what he didn't know was that the road ahead would be anything but smooth, because behind the sweet melodies and family support, a storm was brewing. One that would test her resilience in ways she never imagined. But behind the sweet melodies and family support, a storm was brewing, one that would test her resilience. For most teenagers, high school is a time of friendships, first loves, and self-discovery. But for Connie Francis, it was a time of strict rules, relentless discipline, and overwhelming pressure. While her classmates enjoyed their youth, Connie's life revolved around one thing: music. Her father, George Franconero Sr., controlled every aspect of her existence. There were no dates, no parties, no normal teenage experiences. Romance was forbidden, distractions were unacceptable. Every waking moment had to be dedicated to her craft. To him, she wasn't just a daughter. She was an investment. Despite the suffocating rules, Connie excelled in school. She attended Newark Arts High School, balancing long study hours with an even longer list of musical commitments. But no matter how hard she worked, breaking into the industry was proving to be impossible. Record labels didn't see the potential her father was convinced she had. She faced rejection after rejection, each one cutting deeper into her confidence. Even MGM, the label that eventually took a chance on her, was ready to drop her after a series of failed recordings. Her career seemed like it would never take off until fate stepped in. One day, while her father was desperately pitching her songs to executives, he stumbled upon an unexpected opportunity. An MGM executive's son was celebrating his birthday, and the song, Freddie, happened to share his name. It was a coincidence, a stroke of luck. The boy loved the song, and that was enough to change everything. Just like that, Connie had a contract, but a contract was not the same as success. The industry was ruthless, and Connie was not an overnight sensation. She struggled to find the right sound, the right image, the right moment that would make the world pay attention. With each failed record, she felt the weight of disappointment crushing her. Her father's expectations grew heavier, and self-doubt crept in. Would she ever be good enough? Would all this sacrifice amount to nothing? Then, when it seemed like she might never make it, the breakthrough came. But just as the world began to embrace her voice, she fell in love. And love, as it turned out, would be her biggest battle yet. But just as the world began to embrace her voice, she fell in love. And love, as it turned out, would be her biggest battle yet. Love should be a beautiful escape, but for Connie Francis, it became a battle she never had the strength to win. At the height of her career, she met Bobby Darin, a young, charismatic singer-songwriter whose charm and talent were impossible to ignore. He was everything her world lacked: spontaneous, rebellious, and full of passion. From the moment they met, Bobby was captivated by her. He saw beyond the polished, carefully controlled image. To him, she wasn't just the rising star, Connie Francis. She was the girl behind the music. He wrote songs for her, poured his heart into every lyric, and made sure she knew that his love was real. But her father had other plans. George Franconero Sr. was not a man to be challenged. He had spent years shaping her career, controlling every move she made, and he was not about to let some young singer take that control away. Bobby Darin, in his eyes, was a distraction. A poor kid from the Bronx who would ruin everything he had built. At first, he tried to ignore the growing love between them, but when it became clear that Bobby was serious, he stepped in with full force. He didn't just forbid Connie from seeing him, he made it clear that Bobby was not welcome anywhere near her. And when that wasn't enough, he took it one step further. One night, he confronted Bobby with a pistol. It wasn't a warning, it was a promise. If Bobby ever came near Connie again, there would be consequences. Bobby was devastated, but he refused to give up. He begged Connie to run away with him, to leave behind the suffocating grip of her father's control and start a life together, and for a moment, she considered it. But fear won. Fear of losing her career, fear of defying the only authority she had ever known. She made the choice that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She let Bobby walk away. Years passed, and both moved on. But neither ever truly let go. Bobby married someone else, but his heart never belonged to another. And then, at just 37 years old, he died, far too soon. It was only after his death that Connie learned the painful truth. Bobby had kept every letter she had ever written him, every memory, every word of love, preserved as if he had never stopped hoping that one day they would find their way back to each other. For Connie, it was the deepest regret of her life. No amount of fame, no chart-topping hit could fill the space he left behind. But the heartbreak of lost love was nothing compared to the tragedy that awaited her. For years, Connie Francis had fought battles behind the scenes, against heartbreak, against the pressures of fame, against the weight of expectations, but nothing could have prepared her for what happened in 1974, the night that would shatter her world forever. She was staying at a Howard Johnson's hotel in Long Island, a routine stop on a journey she had made countless times before. But this night was different. As she settled into her room, she had no idea that a nightmare was about to unfold. A stranger forced his way in. What followed was a horrific attack that no amount of fame, power, or success could have protected her from. She was brutally raped and assaulted, left physically and emotionally broken. The pain, the humiliation, the fear, it was something she never spoke about for years. Her voice, which had once been a symbol of joy, was silenced by trauma. She couldn't perform, couldn't find the strength to step back into the world that had once adored her. Her career came to a crashing halt. The spotlight she had spent her life under suddenly felt like a place of unbearable exposure. The impact of that night went far beyond her career. She fell into a deep depression, trapped in a cycle of fear and anxiety. Nightmares haunted her, and the mere thought of stepping onto a stage felt impossible. PTSD consumed her, making even the simplest moments unbearable. But there was another battle to fight. Connie sued the hotel, arguing that their lack of security had allowed this horrific crime to take place. What should have been a straightforward pursuit of justice turned into another painful ordeal. The courtroom became another battlefield, one where she had to relive the most horrifying night of her life over and over again. Lawyers dissected every moment of the attack, every decision she had made leading up to that night. It was a process so cruel, so invasive, that it pushed her to the edge. In her darkest moment, she attempted to take her own life. The pain was too much, the fight too exhausting, but somehow she survived. In the end, she won the case, receiving a $2,500,000 settlement, but there was no real victory. No amount of money could erase the scars, could bring back the person she was before that night. She had lost something far greater than money or career opportunities. She had lost herself. As if this tragedy wasn't enough, another devastating loss soon followed. If there was one person who had stood by Connie Francis through every high and low, it was her younger brother, George Franconero Jr. He wasn't just family, he was one of the few constants in her life, a quiet source of support in a world that had given her so much pain. But in 1978, tragedy struck again, this time in a way that shattered her even further. George was gunned down in cold blood, his life cut short in what many believed to be a mafia hit. He had been working as an attorney, and rumors swirled that he had knowledge of dealings that made him a target. Whether it was about organized crime, illegal finances, or something more sinister, one thing was clear: his murder was no accident. The news hit Connie like a blow she never saw coming. The shock, the horror, the unbearable grief. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had already endured unimaginable pain, but this was different. Losing Bobby Darin had been heartbreaking. The assault in 1974 had destroyed her sense of safety, but this was her brother. The person who had shared her childhood, who had watched her rise to fame, who had protected her in ways no one else had. Her mind spiraled into darkness. She had barely begun to recover from her trauma, and now she was drowning in another. The grief was all. Rumors spread about the nature of the murder. Some whispered that George had gotten too close to secrets that powerful people wanted to be buried. Others said he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The authorities had their theories, but no explanation was enough to make sense of the loss. For Connie, the world had never felt lonelier. She withdrew from the public eye, disappearing into a shell of sorrow. Every attempt to move forward felt pointless. Music, the one thing that had always saved her, suddenly felt empty. She had lost her innocence to fame, her heart to love, her body to violence, and now her family to murder. How much more could she take? But despite the darkness, she fought to reclaim her life and her voice. The pain had followed Connie Francis like a shadow, but she refused to let it define her. She had spent years silenced by trauma, heartbreak, and loss. But in 1984, she decided to take control of her own story. With the release of her autobiography, Who's Sorry Now?, she didn't just tell the world about her success. She laid bare the tragedies that had shaped her. For the first time, people saw the woman behind the music. The pages of her book were filled with unfiltered honesty about the abuse she endured, the heartbreak she never recovered from, and the violence that almost destroyed her. It was a story of pain, yes, but also survival. The book became a bestseller, proving that even after years away from the spotlight, the world still cared about Connie Francis. And more importantly, she was ready to fight for herself again. By 2002, she made another deeply personal move: a tribute album to Bobby Darin. Decades had passed since their love had been torn apart, but she had never forgotten him. She recorded Connie Francis Sings Bobby Darin, pouring her heart into every song, as if she were singing to him one last time. But the years had taken a toll on her body. She suffered a series of mini-strokes, leaving her speech slurred and her strength weakened. Once again, she had to battle not just emotional pain, but physical limitations. Still, Connie refused to fade away. She underwent therapy, retraining herself to speak and sing. Every word she spoke, every note she attempted, It was an act of defiance against the tragedies that had tried to silence her. Despite her struggles, she remained connected to her fans. She appeared on talk shows, gave interviews, and reminded the world why she was still a legend. The way she spoke, the way she carried herself, she still had the same fire, the same charm, the same undeniable presence. She had been broken, but she was never defeated. But at 86, what does she think of it all? At 86 years old, Connie Francis looks back on a life that was extraordinary, heartbreaking, and filled with moments of unimaginable pain. She has endured more loss than most could bear, yet she remains standing, a living testament to resilience. Her voice, once the sound of a generation, still echoes through time. Songs like Who's Sorry Now and The Lipstick on Your Collar continue to play on radio, in films, and in the hearts of those who grew up listening to her. New generations discover her music, drawn to the same emotion and depth that made her a star decades ago. But Connie Francis is more than just her music. She is a survivor. She lost the love of her life, Bobby Darin. She survived a brutal attack that stole her sense of safety. She faced the tragic murder of her brother, a loss too painful to ever forget. And yet, she never let the world break her. Even with the health struggles of recent years, she has remained connected to her fans. She speaks at events, shares her story, and continues to inspire those who have faced their battles. Through it all, her spirit remains unshaken. She has learned to embrace both the joy and the sorrow, knowing that they are both a part of her story. And despite everything she has endured, she holds no bitterness, only gratitude for the moments that made her who she is. She is proof that even when life takes everything from you, you can still rise. Connie Francis's life is one of love, loss, pain, and survival. And though she has lived through the worst, her voice continues to inspire generations.